Okay, hi Deborah, welcome back.
Hi, Douglas. Thank you for having me back.
I'm curious about something now. We looked it up. You were on 11 months ago and you were promoting the same book. So what happened? Did you just decide to do a second media tour or did this book change in some way?
Now, that's a fine question. So, I came on last year for the hardcover release of Reef Road, and now I'm back for the paperback release. And what has changed, the paperback is coming out on January 9th, Tuesday the 9th, and it's got additional material. It's got an interview and a reader's guide. And the book's just been named one of the best books of 2023 by Kirkus. So that's what's changed.
Okay. Is that usual though for somebody to do sort of two book tours of the same book? Because I mean, I don't get
Uh,
that many. In fact, I don't think I've had any on this show.
oh, I'm one of a kind. I think, yeah, I think people do it a little bit. That's a good question.
Well, okay. Always happy to have you here. You're always
Why,
welcome here.
thank you.
We did talk about the book somewhat last time, and I'm trying not to be too repetitive, but I think we'll have to at least cover the basics of the book. The one thing I did want to ask you before we get into that, you've got Ruby Falls and you've got Finding Mrs. Ford, and those are psychological thrillers, correct?
Yes.
Are they completely fiction?
Yes, they are fiction. I mean, all of my books have a little spark of one thing or another that comes from real life. Ruby Falls, for example, is about a young actress. I used to be a young actress, so I can write from what I know about that world, even though the events that play out in her life didn't actually happen to me.
But this one, Reef Road, is really a true story, right? It was about a real murder that really happened.
So the genesis of it is a true story. The novel itself is a complete work of fiction, and one of the characters happens to be a writer who's fixated on the murder of her mother's best friend. So I utilized the details of my own mother's best friend's murder to, fill in as the details of the writer in the novel's mom's friend's murder. But the story itself is not true.
So the murder that happened to the 12-year-old girl in 1948 in Pittsburgh, that didn't really happen.
It did. That is all.
That's the true part.
That is the true part.
Okay.
But I fictionalize it. And I take the details of the real crime that happened to my mother's friend, and I use them as the crime that happened to the writer in the novel's mother's best friend. But then what happens with her, because it's really from a contemporary point of view, it's the story of this writer and another woman whose husband disappears mysteriously, and how these two women interact. So to be really precise, I've utilized a backstory that's true for me and inserted it as the backstory of a fictitious character.
Okay, I got it. I was a little confused because I don't quite remember what we talked about 11 months ago. But the one thing I do remember is that we talked a bit about your relationship with Gene Wilder. That I remember.
We did, yeah.
Yeah.
And we just had his widow, Karen Wilder, come to the Avon in Stamford, Connecticut, a couple of months ago to speak about and show a film that's been made about him. It's a documentary, excuse me, about his life and career, and it's raising funds for Alzheimer's research. It's a wonderful film.
Oh, that's great. I was a big fan of his. I loved his work. I just watched, actually, not too long ago, Silver Streak. The one thing about Gene Wilder that I really liked was that he could be silly, goofy, crazy, like he was in The Producers, and also play really straight like he did in Silver Streak. And there's not a lot of actors that can get away with that. And I always thought that was a great talent that he had, was the ability to do
Gene
that.
Wilder's range was extraordinary, and one of the things you see in this documentary that Karen just brought to the Avon is Gene had a sister, but their mom was an invalid. Their mother had a very severe heart condition. And as a little boy, the doctor came to the house to treat the mom and looked at Gene and said, "Don't ever upset your mother. Don't ever make her angry. Make her laugh." And this became kind of an operating or defining characteristic of him, this mission to make his mother laugh.
Oh, that's great. What a sweet story. So you were also an actor at one time in your life, yeah?
I was. I started after college on a soap opera called All My Children, and I played Silver Kane, who was the sister of Erica Kane.
I remember the show well. Is that still on?
No, it ran for 40 years, and so many of the soap operas died. There are 3 soap operas left. They are all Los Angeles-based shows. There's not a single show left in New York, and it was a major part of the industry in those years. It was kind of an entry point for young actors who were just starting out, and it was also an exit point for older actors who had maybe had bigger careers and were settling down. The older actors on soap operas kind of had the background characters, the supporting characters. So there were a lot of, when I was on All My Children, there were Ruth Warwick, who had been in Citizen Kane. So she'd been very famous in her day. She played Phoebe Wallingford, and she was kind of the grande dame of the town who would pipe in on this or that.
Joan Crawford also filled in for Christina on one of those soap operas as well.
Well, that was a dramatic story, and I think that was probably not such a happy story for the daughter. You never want to think that your mother could replace you. There's something
that would be horrifying
creepy about that. Yeah, I think the mom kind of crossed the line when she did that. I have daughters, and we mothers need to stick to our lane and not intrude on our daughters in that way.
So after that, did you continue acting, or did you just go on to something else?
So I had about a 10-year career as an actress. I left All My Children, and Paramount Pictures flew me out to California to screen test and then eventually act in a pilot with Christopher Lloyd. He'd been in Back to the Future. He's another very funny man. So that really got me to LA, and I had a wonderful 10 years, and then got married and had 2 children in a strange series of circumstances, moved to France. So when I was in France, I worked as a reader for a French film studio. They were investing in English language films, and they really wanted native English speaking readers. It's kind of the first point of entry in the development decisions of a film studio. So I did that there, and then I came back to New York, and I was hired as the story editor at Miramax Films. So I stayed there for a while. And that, I would say, that was my writing school.
We've got just about 3 minutes, and there's a talking point on your bio that I wanted to hit. It says, what is the difference between a reveal and a twist?
Yeah, it's a good question. So a reveal is what plays out in a locked room mystery, such as you would think of Agatha Christie. So you have a set group of characters, you know them all. They are in a contained setting. One of them ends up dead. One of them did it. And at a certain point, someone's going to tell you who the murderer was. That is a reveal. A twist is a different kettle of fish. You're going along in a psychological thriller, and you think one thing is happening, and there's this moment where the rug is pulled out from under you, and you realize something completely different is going on, something you had no awareness of. And the important thing that has to happen to make a twist work is when the twist is presented to you, there has to be a breadcrumb trail that has been dropped so that you can go back in your mind and say, oh, that's why these certain things happened along the way that I didn't understand, and it all starts to make sense.
Okay, right at the top of your bio, it says Queen of Plot Twists. Is that that you've been labeled as that? Is that one of
I
your,
have been labeled.
is that a component of all of your books?
It has been, including the one I'm working on now. Yes, I say that with great humility and a little superstition. I have been able to write pretty good twists so far. I don't know if I'll always be able to do that. I mean, it's kind of hard to come up with a twist, so, you know, let's cross our fingers.
So, Reef Road is the latest book, and now it's out in paperback. And again, the new paperback has some bonus material that wasn't in the hardcover. Yeah.
That's right. There's a great reader's guide. If you're in a book club, you'll want to get the paperback because it's got the guide for discussion that you will want to follow, I think. And it's got a fun interview with me.
The last question is, do you have a website that you want to give out?
I do, and I'd love to have anybody visit me there. It's DeborahGoodrichRoyce.com, and I'm also very active on Instagram. I'm on most of the social media platforms, but Instagram's the one I'm most active on.
Sorry, second to the last question was that one. This is the last question. Are you working on anything else at this point?
I am. I just finished a first draft of another novel, and I've gotten some notes from my editor, so I'm about to go back to the drawing board. And it, again, got a little inspiration from real life. I got an email about a year ago from a man asking if I remembered him, and he had all these touch points where our lives crossed, including coming to the point of saying he saw me at the Cannes Film Festival when I was holding a baby, and he wondered for a moment if the child was his, but he knew that couldn't be possible. And I'm thinking, well, I'm really glad it isn't possible because I don't remember you. And that has become the inspiration for a book about a woman who's contacted by someone she doesn't remember.
Wow. Okay. Well, we'll leave it at that. And maybe the next time you come back on the show, that book will be complete and out.
Well, I hope so.
Deborah, it's always a pleasure to have you on the show. Best of luck, and I hope to see the other book out soon.
Thank you so much. The pleasure's been mine.